Round two of trying to connect. Let's see if we can do it. We got the playfulness, we got the flow ish. Now we got to connect. So, as I said before, hang on, let me see if I can find is invited. Hey, Boggy Creek Farm. Hey, town. I see. Let me just get Catherine on here and see if I can get her on, and then we'll get Charlie on. I'm so sorry. This is why it's so hard. The disconnect and the connect is really a hit sometimes. Hi, Anson. Hi, Aubrey. I see Catherine. It says that she's joined. I'm trying to invite, but it keeps saying you're unable. So let's try this again. I think Mercury in retrograde, the massive storm, all the things. It says that Catherine is unable. So I'm really sorry. I don't know what the disconnect is. I know that Catherine, you're on here, so your internet must be good. I don't know what the disconnect is. Let me get Charlie on here too, so at least we can see. But I'm so appreciative that everyone's on here and ready to discuss Catherine's book, The Power of Fun, because this will be a lot of fun. And I know that she's going to walk us through some great exercises.
Okay.
There she is. I'm so sorry. How many people?
You know what it was, guys? Oh God, I'm dropping everything. Hello, by the way. Is that I have a VPN on my phone to prevent Instagram from creepily tracking me. And it was letting me be on Instagram and do all these other things. But I think that that was what was blocking me from joining, because I was just hitting request. And then, yeah. So anyway, I'm so happy. Okay, hello. We're all here now.
Hi.
So happy to meet you guys.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to meet you. So I'm Jen, and then Charlie is my co-founder in town. We're so appreciative. So I'll let Charlie give a quick explanation about town and why that this is like coming at the perfect time, and you know, why this is kind of like the root of everything that we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, so town, it stands for Take Only What We Need. And Jen and I and another friend have started this sort of community of people trying to look for solutions to burnout for both the planet and ourselves as people. And it feels like if we don't put on our oxygen mask first and take care of ourselves, then how can we be good stewards to the planet? And then if we're not taking care of the planet, then we don't have anywhere to live, and we can't exist, and we can't sustain ourselves. So it's like these two subjects have been spread apart and siloed and not together. And so we're so excited to talk to you today, because we're trying to find people and platforms that can help people be sustained so that they can learn more about the planet, but we have to take care of ourselves. So fun, I feel like, is the soil for creativity and vibrancy and all of that. So it's like, we're just really excited. The book is amazing, and to give us all these tips, we're just excited to dig in.
Yeah, absolutely. So Catherine, if you don't mind introducing yourself to everybody, and then we're gonna—
Yes, that would be wonderful. So first of all, I could not agree more with what you are trying to do and what the platform stands for, and I'm honored to be invited to be part of the community for the day. I think that one of the misperceptions people have about fun is that it's frivolous, but what I found through my research and in the book is that it's actually the exact opposite. The more fun we are having for ourselves, the more energy we're going to have to bring that positivity to the rest of the world as well, and actually work on creating a more sustainable world. Yes, and I'm thrilled you guys picked it as a book club pick, and then I'm also in the midst of doing this February Funtervention, so our timing could not be better, where I'm inviting people to join me as I go through some of the framework in the second half of the book. So I'm happy to talk about anything you guys want to, but I'm really very happy to be with you today.
Oh, we're so excited. There's so many amazing nuggets that I cannot wait to implement, and that I have been implementing. And at the end of this, I have to get the name of the date book that you're talking about, because I'm obsessed. I need, you need to give me that name, because I was listening to you in Audible, and I was like,
well, I can
where
answer
can
that
I get
question
my
really
hands on
quickly.
this
It's called
date book?
Goal Crazy. You're actually sitting on top of it right now because I'm propping it up. I'm propping up my phone on a stack, so I'd show it to you, but you're on it. And there's actually, if people go to my Instagram page, I actually put a post in my static feed with the planner in it. And this will become, it's a planner that helps you identify your goals for the day and make better use of your time. And a friend described it to me as life-changing, and I found it to be so myself. And so I wrote about it in the book. Didn't put the name in because I was worried they'd stop making it and then it would be out of date by the time the book came out. But instead, now I just have all these people writing to me like, what's the name of the planner? So Goal Crazy, and there's a link in my bio and a picture of it in my feed.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, well, so after this, we'll link to it so that anyone who wants to purchase it and your book, which I want to get into the nitty gritties and, you know, spark and magnets and, you know, saying no to things. But first, before we get into that, I really want to talk about how you started your book and why, and how you know, research, because no one ever stops and thinks about fun. It's just fun, and that it's a whole nuance, and there are all these different flavors and colors, and there's true fun, as you talk about. So I'd love to hear about how you got to this place and why you started.
Sure. Yes. So my previous book before this one was called How to Break Up with Your Phone. And that was the direct precursor. Oh my God, amazing. Actually, yes. So that's why I think that Instagram also doesn't want me to be on its platform, because I do a fair amount of Instagram hating in both of my books. And so I really do think sometimes it's like, oh, really? Oh, really? But anyway, that was inspired by this moment I had with my daughter when she was a baby. And I was up with her late one night and I was kind of delirious, you know, early parenting. But I had this sort of out of body experience where I could see the scene from the outside, or as it would appear to someone from the outside. And what I saw was this person sitting in the dark with her baby, and the baby's looking up at her and the mother's looking down at her phone. And it just, my heart sank, because I like to think that I actually am present in my own life and that I am able to make good choices about what I pay attention to. And here I was, I mean, I was actually looking at doorknobs on eBay. Like, that is actually what I was looking at. It wasn't, that's a whole separate story. So that really inspired me to change. I thought, I can't, that's not how I want to live my own life. That's not the impression I want my daughter to have of a human relationship, let alone with her own mom. So that was what inspired How to Break Up with Your Phone, which is basically a look at what our phones and other devices, what they're doing to us in terms of our relationships and our creativity and our productivity and our brains, actually our mental and our physical health. And then that's combined with a 30-day plan I came up with to help people take back control. So that's great. So I'd gone through that process. I did feel like I had much better boundaries with my phone, but I hadn't realized that there's an important next step, because if you think about how much time we're currently spending on our devices and on screens, if you think about screens in general, it's probably honestly like half of our waking lives, if not more. But just our phones before the pandemic were about 4 hours a day for the average person. And that adds up to 60 full days a year. It's a quarter of our waking hours. And some of that time might be essential or enjoyable, right? But a lot of it is not. But if you take that away, you end up with a lot of time. And I had this freak out moment when I was deliberately taking a break from all my digital devices. My husband and I were doing a practice that we think of as kind of like a digital Sabbath, or like a Shabbat type thing, but with digital things. And I was sitting in this very room and I had this whole hour in front of me. I could do whatever I wanted to with. My daughter was napping, my husband was out. It should have been this like amazing moment as a early parent. And instead, I could not think of anything to do. Like, my mind was totally blank. And it made me really upset, because again, I think of myself as a self-aware person who presumably is interested in her own life and has passions, and I couldn't think of any of them. So that was what launched the journey that led me to write The Power of Fun, is that I asked myself this question that I asked people when I was researching How to Break Up with Your Phone, that I encourage everyone on this call to ask themselves too, which is, what's something you say you want to do but supposedly don't have time for? And my answer was, I wanted to learn to play the guitar. I signed up for a guitar class, met this whole community of people, began to experience this joyful aliveness that I now identify as fun. And that's what led me to write The Power of Fun.
Wow.
That's awesome. And I think that even in that void, and there's like a sense of boredom, which then comes a sense of creativity that kind of birthed out of that.
I think that it allows you to be creative, that we can't be creative if you're constantly subjecting your brain to just a fire hose of stimulation and information, which is what happens all the time. I mean, even doing an Instagram live, right? Like I've seen, I don't even know what the deal is with all those hearts that are going up in the corner. So
that's standard for Jen. This is just Jen. Yes.
No. It's probably for my husband. They're like, where's Jared? I'm like, no, this is not about Jared. So anyone asking about Jared, Jared is not, he's in another room far away, not here, looking after
That's
kids,
so funny. But
so
it's like you don't have any space for your own brain. And if our brains are constantly on intake mode, trying to deal with multiple streams of information and stimulation and content at once, then there's no space for them to be creative. And that's something that very interestingly, I thought, because I'm a huge dork in the science journals, but that's like legitimate, like something that happens in our brains. You can't, if you want to be a creative person, you have to have a lot of material in your brain, right? Like you can't be a chef if you have no ingredients in the cupboard. And the material that we're drawing upon when we're creative is really our past experiences, our memories, our knowledge. Because if you think about creativity as the ability to draw connections between seemingly disconnected things, you need to have some things to draw connections between. And it turns out that in order to store stuff in your long-term memory, you need to not be distracted. That actually requires, this is super dorky, but you make new proteins in your brain when you make new long-term memories, and that process is interrupted by distraction. So I actually had a really weird fact-checking experience where I ran into the scientist. I was on a train before the pandemic. I ran into the guy who won a Nobel Prize for discovering that, like Eric Kandel. I just happened to sit across from this guy.
That's not by accident, though. I feel like sometimes those things.
It was amazing, and
like,
so I actually ran up to him and I was like,
amazing.
"Oh my god! I have this idea, and I wanted to see if you think it's crazy." And I said, "Do you think it's possible that all the if it's true that you can't be distracted to make long-term memories, and you need these long-term memories and knowledge to be creative? Is it crazy to think that all the distractions from our devices might be getting in the way of the actual physical things that need to happen in our brains in order to have long-term memories?" And Eric Kandel thought for a second and then said, "No, that makes a lot of sense." And I was like, "Oh my God, that was the best experience of my life." But anyway, yes. So the short answer to your question, that was a long answer. The short answer is yes. You need to have space for creativity.
Well, and you talk about fake fun, and I think it's important to just like sort of discern between, a real fun that is and you talk about what fun is, and I can't wait to sort of get into that like Venn diagram a bit. But can you tell us a little bit about what fake fun is? Because I feel like there's so much that we do that's fun or like decompressing, but isn't actually restorative or rewarding in some way. And I think it's an important distinction of knowing what real fun and true fun is versus fake.
Yeah. So one thing I thought was really interesting when I was researching the book and just thinking more about fun myself is that we use the word all the time, but we don't really think very critically about like, what is it actually? Like, what is fun? And if you look in the dictionary, the definition will be things like lighthearted pleasure or just enjoyment. But that's not what you get if you ask people to think of their own memories from their own lives of things that were really fun. You get this much more profound feeling, this kind of joyful energy coming from people. And the best way to describe that would be the moments where we have that kind of fun are the moments in which we feel joyfully alive. And I started to notice the fact that we don't have a very good definition of fun means that we're really vulnerable to any marketer who wants to tell, or company that wants to tell us their activities or products or services are, quote, fun, even if they don't make us feel joyfully alive. And we'll kind of accept that unthinkingly because we just don't think that much about fun. So I wanted to make this distinction between the activities and the people and the settings that truly do make us feel joyfully alive from those that, if we really think about it, are often wastes of time. And, in a lot of cases, that's things such, it's kind of like the junk food of fun. And again, I feel bad saying this on Instagram, but for many people, like social media is the main one there. Hopefully in our conversation, people will actually truly be getting something from it. But we all know that a lot of times when you go to social media, it's just to fill up a moment of time, or it's to give yourself a distraction or a hit of dopamine. And if you really thought about it, are you going to be like, oh, I'm really glad I spent 2.5 hours in little fragmented chunks on Instagram today? Probably not. But you kind of bought into the idea that that's something that's okay to do because we're kind of told that that's like something fun to do with our leisure time, or it's a way to connect with people, even though in many cases, what we're really doing is just scrolling through, stuff that doesn't matter to us. But yes, but I think the importance of being able to identify whatever the sources of fake fun are in your life, the importance is then, once you identify it, it's stuff you do with your leisure time. So by definition, it's voluntary. So if you decide you don't enjoy it, that's low-hanging fruit. Get rid of that And then you'll end up with more space for things that truly bring you joy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like true fun. And I want to back up just a little bit, because what I love is that first you define like true fun and achieving. It's like almost this like sense of nirvana, like you're in this, true fun is, what you talk about is playfulness, connection, and flow, which I'd love to get into. But when those three things sort of collide, you get true fun and the meaning of true fun. I also love that you break it down so that you're empowered as a person to go, oh, this is what I find fun. I see these different components, and then having a diagram and a chart. So, which sounds very geeky, but I love that kind of stuff, because you can actually define what makes sense to you, what brings you happiness, what sparks joy, as opposed to external things telling you like, no, you need to scroll on this, or you need to buy this, and I'm so guilty. I'll be like, oh, I love those pants. I'm gonna, in mid conversation with people, it's so distracting at times. So to be able to really be mindful of the things that do spark joy and bring true fun, how did you come to that place? How did you discover that those were the three ingredients that make true fun?
I came up with this definition of true fun because of what I was just saying, where it was just, there was this disconnect between what the dictionary said fun was and then the feeling I got when I was playing music with other people, or when I was having true fun with my husband and my daughter, for example, or when I was laughing with a friend. It was like, this is not just lighthearted pleasure. This is really what's making life worth living. Like, there's something much deeper. Then I thought, am I crazy? That's a constant question I ask myself. Am I crazy? So I recruited this big group of people from around the world that I called the Fun Squad. And I asked them to recount to me 3 experiences from their own lives that they would describe as having been, quote, so fun, right? It's very scientific, so fun. And I did that during, it's worth noting, because I know you were saying this when we were trying to get the call started, in the beginning of the pandemic lockdowns, because I signed the book contract in April 2020. So this was like very restricted time. And I was really curious to see what people would say. And I noticed that the anecdotes people shared were very different in their content. Examples range from, little things like squishing mud through my toes with my best friend Margaret, like when I was a teenager, or, a lot of childhood memories, like decorating my bedroom as a pink Parisian oasis and staying up late with my mom talking in silly accents. Some things like happened the day before, playing fetch with a particularly exuberant dog. Someone told me about this life-changing experience they had in Siberia after college, spending an afternoon playing music, singing, and doing volunteer work with a group of orphans, where this person said that it was one of the peak memories from their lives. They hardly talked about it because they didn't have words to describe it, but if they had to choose a word, it would be fun. So it's really interesting because they were very different in their details, but the energy was the same. And so I asked people if I had come up with this hypothesis myself, that fun was the combination of playfulness and connection and flow. And I asked people, after I had them share the anecdotes, like, would you agree? And the vast majority said yes. And I thought, well, that's so interesting that this isn't just me. There is this feeling that, and I was flipping through papers as you were talking, because I've been giving talks this week, and I'm like so done with PowerPoint and all that stuff. So I actually was making my own homemade slides. So if it's helpful for anybody, this is what I came up with, which is that playfulness, connection, and flow, they're all wonderful on their own, but when you have them happen all at once, you get this center thing of true fun. I mean, you can have playfulness, and I can't even read this, playfulness and flow, that's great. Playfulness alone, great. This comment, great. But all 3 of them, true fun. And what I like to clarify for people, just to tell you what I mean by those things, because I think a lot of grown-ups in particular, you hear playfulness and you think I'm saying you have to go on the monkey bars or you have to play make-believe. And I personally hate make-believe, and I hate charades, and that stuff makes me clench up. It's really just about having a lighthearted attitude and doing things for the sake of doing them, and not caring too much about the outcome, not getting so wrapped up in perfectionism and performance that you aren't able to enjoy what you're doing. And then the connection element is that in every case of fun that anyone shared with me, there was a feeling of connection. Sometimes it was just the feeling of being connected with your authentic self, which I shouldn't say just, because that's actually really powerful. But when we're having fun, we're not performing for someone else. So there's this authenticity to it. Sometimes it was a sense of connection with your physical body. There's so often we think of ourselves as like heads that walk on bodies, and we're just paying attention to neck up. But when people really got in touch with their physical selves, sometimes it was with the activity itself. But in the vast majority of examples people shared with me, the connection was with another person in person, or, you know, actually talking to them, not like a social media kind of connection where you're asynchronously, like different times kind of communicating with people you may or may not know, but this real special shared experience. That was a term people used again and again. And it was so interesting because when I asked people what surprised you about what you just told me in terms of the 3 stories, a lot of people said things like, I'm a self-proclaimed introvert, and yet all 3 stories that I just shared with you had other people in them. And that really surprised me. Yeah, and it made me think, you know, it's less about the difference between introverts and extroverts is less about whether or not you like feeling connections with human beings, but more the type of connections or the type of human beings that you want to connect with. And then lastly, flow is a term psychologists use to describe the experience of being so lost in your present experience that you lose track of time. So the most quintessential example is like an athlete in the middle of a game. But you can also experience flow yourself. Everyone's experienced it when you're lost in a particularly fun or good conversation, or you're doing a project, whether it's for work or for personal pleasure, that you just are really absorbed in. The important thing to note about flow, though, is that the passage of time also happens when you do things like binge watch Netflix for 7 hours in a row. That's not the same thing because that's passive consumption. It's more like hypnosis. That's what's called junk flow. So we're really talking about active engagement where you are doing something, or you're not just consuming, you're doing. So again, all 3 of those states are wonderful for us on their own, both in terms of how they make us feel and then what they do for our physical health, which is also interesting. But when you have all 3 of them together, you end up with what I consider to be true fun.
Absolutely. Now I read somewhere that you started your research way before the pandemic.
Well, in a sense, because I as a freelance journalist, I'd done a ton of work about positive psychology, which is basically the science of understanding what makes humans thrive instead of just what makes us go wrong. It's like, what makes things go well? What are the characteristics, psychological and otherwise, that help us flourish? And then how can we help more people do that? I also have a background in mindfulness. I've done a lot of writing. I wrote a guided journal for mindfulness, so the practice of becoming more aware of and present in our experience. So I brought all that to the table. And then how to break up with your phone, as I was saying, it was like weird to me that these 2 things were so connected. But I think the more I researched and the more I talked to people, the more clear it became that many of the downsides of screen time are the exact opposite of the positive effects of fun. You know, when we spend all our time in front of our computers and our email inboxes, which I'm certainly guilty of, and we're not outside, we're not moving, we're not actually engaged with other people in real life, we're not actually feeling very joyful and present, right? Total contrast to how we feel when we're truly having fun. So it's interesting that, I started thinking about it in earnest as a result of that moment on my couch. But if I do reflect back on my own life, I think fundamentally it's about how do we live as fulfilling a life as possible? And then how do we share that with other people? So it's kind of been an interest of mine, totally self-interestedly, by the way, because I want to do that for myself. But that's been a consistent through line.
Same. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And we talk about all the time with Town, like this balance of, you know, the mindfulness and being present and using social media like we're doing as a tool and a means, you know, to connect. But would you also did you notice that in your research that there is a change pre and post pandemic, like connection and how to connect? Like, for instance, my kids, I feel for them because we kept them home all last year. And I don't allow them to text message. And so a lot of my friends were, you know, and everyone's different. I get so weird about connecting at such a young age via text. But the argument was like, that's the way of the future. That's how our children are being raised, and that isn't going anywhere. And, you know, how to be able to connect in that way. Did you notice in your research that there was a big difference in how people connect, or true fun, or if it was different, you know, post pandemic or in this pandemic world versus pre-pandemic?
Well, no, a couple thoughts on that. One, I think it's interesting in terms of the question about the kids, is that a lot of people will say that's the future, but then, like you said, that's how we're raising them. And to me, it's like, well, okay, so it's the future because we're raising them that way. It doesn't have to be the future. The future doesn't have to be anything in particular. It's because it's kind of accepting as a fait accompli the idea that all human connection is going to take place in Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse or whatever. Like, we're no longer going to even know what a tree is, or let alone like that we actually have a body underneath our heads, because we'll all just be in virtual reality, right? So I think that that's important to kind of think about, is that no, we make choices about what our future is going to be and what the future for our children is. And if that doesn't sound like a good future, then we don't have to push them in that direction. So I would say that in terms of the influence the pandemic has had, one good thing I think is that I think it has helped clarify for people how important human connection is, because we weren't able to have it, and we haven't been able to have it in the same way that we were able to and took for granted, honestly, before the pandemic. I mean, I'm very cautious. I've got type 1 diabetes. You know, we spent all last year basically living with my parents, and they're vulnerable, right? Like, we kept our own daughter home as well. And so I don't want to get it. So I've been very restricted. And I'm like, I took for granted just being able to casually have people over for dinner, right? Like how I wish I could do that. Or in this very room at some point right before the pandemic, we had this big party where we invited people over. We called it a salon, which is something I used to do a lot in my past, of like just adult show and tell kind of, where people came over without, it was no kids, and just shared something or performed something or did something or talked about something that interested them, that lit them up. And it was amazing. Can't do that right now. Like, you know, it's just, so I think it's really helped a lot of us like narrow in on what we really care about. And I think it actually is a really useful question to ask ourselves, is what's something you really missed in the past 2 years? Because that should be your priority as soon as it's available again. I would say one of the other benefits is that I do think that the pandemic has opened up other ways for us to connect with each other, in the sense of, I mean, honestly, everyone's zoomed out by this point, right? But like, to suddenly realize, oh, I actually can have a call. I can connect with this friend, even though I can't be with them in person, because technology can serve that purpose. I mean, I think that what we're doing is a really amazing use of technology. I'm really enjoying getting to talk to you, and it's something that couldn't have happened without technology. And I personally am more appreciative of technology than I was before the pandemic, with also the realization that if given the choice, I do not want to be on a screen. I want to be with people in person, doing things in person, right? Yeah. So I think there are some potentially beneficial shifts in perspective that have come from it. Another one that's happened for me that I encourage people to kind of reflect on is that I think I myself had the assumption when I started this project that having fun required doing something exotic or getting out of your everyday life, going on vacation, or really trying something new that required effort or travel or money. And that was kind of depressing to me when I signed the book contract again in the beginning of the pandemic, because it's like, well, won't be doing those things. But then what I came to realize is that that's actually wrong. Like, yes, those things could be conducive to fun. But if you think about fun as this combination of playfulness and connection and flow, there's actually opportunities for it all around us all the time. We're just not noticing them, and we're not labeling them. Mm-hmm. And if you don't notice or label something, then it just slips by unappreciated. You know, instead we end up focusing on the things that bring us anxiety and fear. And that's actually something our brains are primed to do, because that's how we've survived as a species, right? Like, if we didn't automatically gravitate towards potential threats, then we would get wiped out. So it really does take effort to reorient ourselves towards the positive things in life. And I don't mean to sound like a Pollyanna at all, but I've really found for myself that noticing moments of connection and flow and playfulness, like actually labeling this conversation we're having in my mind right now as a moment of fun that I'm having in my day, even though I'm in my living room, is really helpful when I reflect on, when I use my journal that you will soon have, when I reflect on the day, I now know that I had a moment of fun in a way that I might not have if I hadn't taken the time to actually like label it as such. So I think that's been really useful for me. It's like, oh no, there's actually opportunities for that floating around us all the time. And there was a beautiful example someone shared with me on that note where this young guy, he told me he had 2 hours of straight fun, true fun, sitting on a park bench with his nephew, just trying to catch falling leaves. And when he said that, I was like, Joe, you just made my metaphor literal. Like, there are actually opportunities for fun that you reached out and you grabbed them. It didn't take any money. It didn't take travel. They were there in the air, and you grabbed them and you had true fun. I just thought that was so beautiful, and something that stuck with me as an image.
That's so, I mean, and it's wild because with Town, we're trying to like really, you know, germinate these ideas of like helping people feel like that living at all and living well and living within your means and not taking too much and not, wasting too much, but really like sitting down and focusing on things that are, that are remunerative emotionally and physically and all these things. So, how do we find those moments and be intentional about it? But what I love about what you're saying is the pandemic has been this moment of reflection to say, like, what are the things I miss? What are the things I need? And not just taking it as like this crisis moment, but a real teaching and lesson. And then now let's take stock in that. And you do that so beautifully in your book, where you're looking at the things that take away from that time, that possibility and opportunity of fun, and then going, invest time in figuring out what those things are. Look at through this lens of these 3 points and try to create more true fun. In one of the other things that I do for a living, I'm trying to create fun around the world and create that connection with this weird scavenger hunt thing called Gish. We tried.
Ooh, I want to do that.
It's bananas.
Oh, it's
but we basically take 110 countries and try to connect them together to try to achieve these challenges. And what I'm always blown away by is when we start committing ourselves to the act of fun or to the inspection of it, we start having fun invariably. Like it just starts manifesting. And that's why I think like I'd love to like talk a little bit about the Funtervention and for February, and also the quiz that you have on your site, because you can take a quiz and find out what your fun is. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, so I would love to invite everyone in your audience to join this February Funtervention that I've got going on right now. You can just go to that website, howtohavefun.com, and then there's a sign up. And basically the idea is that I didn't want fun to just be this abstract, nebulous concept. Great, I'm defining it as playful, connected flow. Oh, Catherine, you've got your Venn diagram. Good for you. What am I supposed to do with that, right? Like, as I say in the book, saying go have fun is just not helpful. Like I know how to have a croissant or like have a cup of coffee, but how do I have fun? And so I wanted to break it down into something that is much more under our control. And we've already started to touch upon some of those ideas already. But what I realized is that, I do believe that playful connected flow is a universal definition of true fun, but each of us finds that in different ways. As I said, charades, not going to do it for me. I will clench up. I actually recently did an interview where this guy tried to get me to do like an improv comedy exercise at the beginning of it, and I didn't know what he was doing. And that is like my absolute nightmare, is like improv. Like I love improv comedy, but not doing it. And so it's not my thing. So I wanted to help people identify what I refer to as their fun magnets, which are the activities and the settings and the people that typically generate fun for you. They might not always, because fun's an emotional experience. You can't force it, right? It's like romance. Like you can set the stage for it, but if you try too hard, you're gonna run away, you get totally creeped out by you. So you don't want to do that. But I think what's really great about trying to identify some of your own personal fun magnets is that once you have that knowledge of some of the things that often generate fun for you, then you can actually put it on your calendar. Like I can't say in my goal crazy planner, Saturday night, I'm going to have fun from 8 to 10 p.m. Like that is ridiculous, a fool's errand. Fun will laugh at me and flee. But I could say, all right, I know that I have fun playing music with this particular group of people. So we're going to meet in a parking lot. True story. I do this quite often. And we're going to play music together. And I can set aside, carve out that space for it. And I know that that is much more likely to generate fun for me than, I don't know, sitting here and just continuing to try to empty my email inbox. Like that's not going to be fun. So basically the framework in the book is meant to help you turn it from an abstract concept into something you have control over. And in the Funtervention, I'm walking people through this SPARK framework in the book. And the S is for make space, because you need to clear out space because we're all feeling so overwhelmed. Like we need to actually have the emotional and the mental and even physical space for fun to happen. The P is about pursuing passions. So tapping back into things that light you up inside, or maybe discovering new things that you're curious about trying or learning. And if you can't do these things with other people right now because of whatever restrictions there are, maybe you could learn something, train yourself for fun is the way that I thought about it when I was doing it myself during the peak pandemic, so that you then have more ways to have fun when you are able to connect with people. And the attract fun is about, the A is for attract fun, which is about adopting what I think of as a fun mindset. So how do you, just we were talking about, open yourself to pre-existing opportunities for playful connected flow, or how do you generate new ones? One idea I'd love to share with your audience is the idea of noticing delights It's a very easy thing you can do today to just start to shift your brain. And it's an idea I got from Ross Gay, who's a poet who wrote a book called The Book of Delights, appropriately enough. It's inspired me so much that I actually have a bracelet on my wrist that says delight. It's less commitment than a tattoo. But the idea is that just as you go about your normal day, you just notice things that delight you, like anything, doesn't matter how small. And when you notice it, you put a finger in the air and you say out loud, delight. And it's actually important, even though you'll feel kind of silly the first couple times. And this practice of noticing and labeling will help it boost your spirits and your resilience. So for example, my mother-in-law made these coffee mugs, and every time I use it, I get a little bit of delight, right? So it's like, doesn't need to be big. And then a great thing to do with that, and a way to use technology and social media for good, is to actually post your delights or send them in a delight text chain to your friends and your family members with the caption delight exclamation point. So I've been using the hashtag delights for that. So if anyone wants to share them, I love seeing them. But I'm collecting delights from people around the world. And what's really cool about it is that it's contagious in a good way. I should clarify, given what we're going through. You read delights and you yourself will be delighted, and you'll be more primed to notice more delights. And the more you notice delight, the more primed you'll be to have more fun. So that's that. And then the R of this Spark framework is for rebel, which is kind of my favorite, is just doing something a little bit unconventional or out of the ordinary, or breaking a rule. You know, as simple as like, some people said things like eating cookies for dessert, or, you know, blasting music when you should be listening to an educational podcast, or taking a break from your work and like just dancing for a couple minutes, something that goes against your normal adult responsibilities. Nice. And then the K is for keep at it. I just gave you like such a long answer, but
no, this is perfect.
Yes.
No, I love
people need, I mean, go take the quiz, go to howtohavefun.com, right?
Yes. Are you talking about the personality quiz though?
Well, there's a personality quiz, and then, I mean, the Spark pieces, and I think the thing that you're leading with the fun prevention will give people framework to really investigate and dig into this. And I think that you definitely go do that, but then also take your personality quiz, because it really gives you a full sense of like, what is, like, because our fun isn't the same. Like, Jen loves silence. I want it to be loud. Like, whatever that is, we all have a little bit of a different framework for how we define it and where it comes in for us. So it's good to know what yours is and what other people's are, and find those connection points.
Also, not just like the to-dos, but also the don'ts, which for me is really helpful because I need that framework. So also eliminating things for me is like, oh, I am not going to do these things today, is really helpful too, in terms of finding weeding out things and weeding out noise.
Yes. Well, it's interesting. So I created a bunch of quizzes, and again, I'll share them all with the fun intervention. I think we may be talking also about the fun compatibility quiz, which is a fun thing to do with other people in your life to figure out what brings you each fun individually and see where you do or don't overlap. But I also made a quiz that's why aren't you having fun, which I realize sounds mean to ask people right now. So I've kind of hesitated about sharing that one, but the idea is actually a good one, which is to identify which of those three components, playfulness, connection, and flow, which one you could use the most work on, like which is the most difficult for you. I also have another quiz that's which is your fun superpower, which is kind of the same thing on a flip side, more positive. Oh. No, but I noticed that for the majority of people, the issue is going to be flow. And that's because we're constantly distracted. Like we're not actually present. And so I think a lot of what we're talking about in this conversation is the idea of how do we carve out space to have fun? How do we give ourselves permission for it? But then how do you reduce distractions, just be present, doing one thing at a time, not feel constantly overwhelmed, so you can even begin to think about it. Letting go of perfectionism. And that's something, I mean, social media is that is a real challenge with it, right? It's like no one's posting videos to YouTube of their first try. No one's posting pictures on Instagram of them when they first wake up in the morning. Like that's just not. So we're constantly bombarded by other people's quote perfect selves. It makes us feel bad about ourselves, but then we do the same thing. It's like mutually assured destruction. So fun can help us let go of that.
Amazing.
And so I could talk to you all day because I just love picking your brain, and I love your book. So I'm only I'll ask one question, Charlie.
Then we can get to the improv comedy portion of the last question. We'll do that next.
Oh, I'm having technical difficulties again.
Oh, wait a minute.
No, because Charlie and I were talking earlier, and we both have children, and I know you have a child. I guess for me, like, where do you see, because I struggle so much with my kids and also being a digital presence and like modeling good behavior, and knowing that we all grew up with half of our lives without, you know, a digital space and digital world, like, do you see fun evolving and changing? Do you see this getting worse, and like we're gonna have to constantly remind our next generations what fun looks like?
Yeah. What's the future of
I need
fun?
some hope right now.
You want hope, because I could go either direction on that. So,
Great.
well, I will say that I think fun is part of who we are as humans. So we always will have a desire for it and a need for it, and we always will have the capacity to experience it. But there's certainly conditions that are more conducive to fun than others. And I do think that we have a challenge right now where we are going in a direction that's not very conducive to fun, whether it's the perfectionism that's, again, encouraged by social media, or the demands for, quote, success at an earlier and earlier age, you know, treating childhood like it's a resume building opportunity, and this kind of rat race that starts when kids are in preschool. Right. That is not conducive to fun. And most importantly, it's not conducive to a joyful, satisfying life for our children. We're just training them, to be like worse versions of ourselves. Yeah. So I think that we need to actually, that's part of the reason I think it's so important to actually think about and prioritize fun, because the world is moving in this direction of performance and perfection and distraction and being online all the time. Again, I very much appreciate technology, and I think that in my optimistic moments, I do think there's ways that technology actually really does facilitate fun. For example, when I play music with friends, we use a guitar tabs app to look up songs on the fly, which is freaking amazing if you think about it, that we can all have the music for any song we want to play and we can listen to it anytime. That's amazing. So I think that there's a real positive potential in technology, but there's also the flip side that the goals of many of these apps is to take our time and attention from us, because that is how they make money. And so we need to be very on guard for ourselves and our children, because they're really powerful and they're really good at it. And we're so vulnerable, both because we haven't thought about these things seriously ourselves. We haven't thought about what actually matters to us in life and what it will take to protect it. And also because our brains are vulnerable. They're taking advantage of evolutionary quirks of our brains, where we're going to be easily distracted by anything that triggers dopamine, for example. Yeah. And unless we're aware of that and also conscious of what we want to be spending our time and attention on, then we're going to fall prey to their tactics. So I think we have a choice, I guess is what I'm saying. I think there is an optimistic future where people do take fun more seriously, where they understand how it can be a rejuvenating and life-giving force that can help us solve the world's problems, live more sustainable lifestyles, be our authentic selves, and have meaningful relationships. Or we can go down this path of continuing to let ourselves be manipulated and honestly controlled by companies that don't actually have those goals in mind. So it's kind of up to us, I guess, is what I'm saying. And my hope is that my book will lay that out for people and give them tools they need to take this path instead.
Mm.
Yeah. I love that. You're really leading the charge with this, you know, people like you, Tristan Harris, like whistleblowers that are like, hey, wait, like, let's pay attention here. Like, these things are happening. And I appreciate you spelling it all out and allowing me to sort of have a guideline to help.
Yeah, I think our kids need to see us prioritizing fun, and not just fun for them. You know, so often, like, we'll create and manufacture opportunities for fun for our kids. But what are we doing? We're sitting on the sidelines, like, you know, on the floor, like charging our phones, trying to get a couple work emails done. So they're not seeing us actually put any of this message into practice. And I also think that we will be, I can speak from personal experience, like if you're feeling any resentment or fatigue or exhaustion over parenthood or anything in your life, that may be because you are not having enough fun for yourself. And I can say, you know, for myself, when I don't get to do the things that are fun for me, you can see it. Like just these past couple of weeks, I haven't been going to my guitar class because of Omicron. Like I'm just letting it die down a bit before we wear masks, and I've got an air purifier, but I'm just, again, really cautious. You can tell, like my husband is like, you need to go back to that class really bad. Like, So I think that we often overlook how nourishing it can be for ourselves, because then we have enough energy. Our own tanks are full. Like we were saying, the oxygen tank that we then can give and be more playful and be more present and be better role models. So I think there's a lot of spiraling positive effects that come when we start to take fun more seriously. And just really to emphasize, like with the message of what you're doing in terms of sustainability, one of the biggest pushbacks I get from people when we talk about fun is the idea that there's all these serious things in the world that we need to be paying attention to. How can we also think about fun? So I just really want to reemphasize that those are not, they don't need to be so separate. You need to have energy yourself to do those things and to approach these problems creatively. And also, I think that there's also often this element of guilt that we feel at the idea of enjoying our own lives. And we need to let go of that, that you can be someone who cares about important things and also enjoy your life. You're not actually doing anyone any good by doom scrolling or by putting screeds on Facebook about your political beliefs. That's not changing anyone's mind, right? Like if you prioritize fun and connect with people on a human level, you actually be doing more good for the world. So I really think we need to rethink that for ourselves, and give ourselves permission slips to have fun.
Joy and fun as fuel for activism, for parenthood, for all these areas of life that, for ourselves, for all of that. I 100% agree with you. Like when we lose connection to things that, whether that's doing something physical with your body or making art, you know, we start to become sort of caricatures of ourselves or like weird, out of focus versions of ourselves. And just so grateful for this conversation too, and just continuing to look for that fun. And so everybody go to howtohavefun.com, go sign up for Funtervention. I'm going to sign up for Funtervention for sure. I need a Funtervention.
Yeah. We'll link it both in, we'll link in town.
That'll be absolutely wonderful. And I was going to say, I also, you know, I really appreciated being a book club pick in particular, because like one of my goals and one of the things I think is the most fun about it is to talk about this stuff with other people in your life. So I actually created a whole set of questions that people can use to have their own discussions. I encourage people to recruit their own fun squads, as I call them, like groups of people in their own lives who they already have fun with or who they want to have more fun with, and read the book and discuss some of these questions and see where it leads you. So I will share that with you guys as well if you want to link to those as a resource for people.
Totally.
I know,
right?
Have a whole
fun app.
And then my mind will explode.
Here,
like, but it's an app, but it's fun, but it's
like the Tinder of fun. I don't know. Oh God.
I'm gonna think on that.
Yeah.
That might be what Tinder is, but in a different way. I'm not sure.
like a fun Tinder, like a Tinder for fun.
Yeah.
Where you just can like you. Yeah. Well, I see what you think.
Well, yeah. Like I don't know. It's like you match up. You
actually no. I really do like that idea. Yeah. Well, there's I mean, just as a kind of a tangent, but one thing I've really been thinking about is the idea that kids have playmates, but adults don't have playmates, because it almost sounds dirty even to say that. But I don't mean that kind of playmate. I mean like, who are the people in your life that you just get together with to play, right? Like kids are not necessarily best friends with all their playmates. And adults, we've got colleagues, we've got loved ones, we might have dear friends, we have acquaintances, but who do you play with? And I think that was something that really stood out to me about this guitar community that I tapped into, is these are people I'm not necessarily going to be super close with. Although honestly, genuine friendships have developed as a result of us playing together. But it's also just this community of people where when I go to it, I'm just there to play. And that feels so foreign as an adult and so freeing. So I think it's something fun to play around with, and we totally could do fun Tinder. We just have to clarify what kind of playmate we're talking about.
Do it.
Maybe there's certain things we're looking for here, and maybe not the other things. But maybe, I don't know. You know, it's.
I just want to hear more of
those puns. 100%.
You know.
Don't encourage me.
Yeah, if you like fun or puns, read this book. It's perfect.
Oh man, see, you're doing my job for me. I appreciate
that. The dad jokes are strong, and that's another thing too. By the way, I feel like there's a gender stereotype that maybe dads bring the play and fun more than moms, and I totally don't agree. Like my mom, as a single mom, gave us so much opportunity for fun, for play, and for storytelling, and I just, you know. It's such a generational thing. Like we can give that to our kids. If we focus on it for ourselves, we can then offer that imagination and fun and investigation to our kids. And that's a great place to be. So much learning happens, so much creativity happens when we're in that flow, which is a point well met.
Yeah, and you make a really good point about learning, that people learn better when they're having fun, which is, you know, going to our conversation about kids. Like I think that's so important, because we typically think of education as something that happens when you sit kids down and lecture to them. Like, that's so stupid.
Yeah.
Like, I think our daughter, I mean, we really tried to, the reason we stayed with my parents for the pandemic is because they actually have some space to run around and outside. And so we tried to give her as many opportunities as possible to go interact. Like, we got a worm composter, right? And like, we went out and she collected caterpillars and we hatched butterflies in the kitchen. It was these experiences that I think will stay with her far better than, or far longer than anything she would have experienced in a traditional classroom environment. And also learning more because it's experiential. So I think we really do undervalue fun as a tool for learning too.
Oh yeah, and I also find that most of it, at least for me and my perspective, is nature. A lot of nature-based stuff because it's right there and it's free and you can learn so much from it, like a worm compost, or one of my kids does a nature camp, and the first thing that he does every time he goes is he dips his head in the mud and sees how dirty he can get, and comes back and he's literally like apparently built a fire and he's got burns on him, and I'm like, oh my god, but he's like, it was the best day, I learned so much about my boundaries.
You're like, did you? Did you?
And like, okay, yeah, let's not bring it home. But there's so much to be learned from that, and I don't think that we always get that from the boxes sometimes that we can find ourselves in, or the traditional ways that we think that we're supposed to learn. So I don't know, kudos to you for just letting your daughter get out there and like learn from the world.
I would say just as one idea, if anyone else there is in a cold environment in the Northeast, one thing that was really fun last year, speaking of nature, is maple tapping, guys. That's the season.
Wow.
And if you, it's starting.
Is
Yeah,
it
I think right now it's pretty cold here, but like late February, the sap will start running. And if you something you can do, even if you're totally restricted and not able to do much in general, is look up online how to identify a sugar maple, and get a tap off Amazon or whatever, and a bucket, and go find a tree to tap. It's actually really fun. My husband and I ended up making simple syrup because we didn't want to boil it all down. It's a 40-to-1 ratio, but it's just, the sap itself is interesting, and it's fun for kids and adults alike. And then you learn something about sugar maples, and then you get to be that person that, anytime anyone goes for a walk with you, you're like, did you know? Did you know it's a sugar maple? But
I got bees in the backyard, so I do that as a party trick too. I'm like,
if I'm at
do you
bees,
want some honey?
do you want me
It's
my
from the
bees?
backyard.
Steps out gonna be bees. We know about bees. I know, that's definitely me. I'm like, do you know what that leaf is? Did you know what that leaf is? But that goes back to the idea of like, even when we can't do much with other people, you can still learn something that you then can use as a tool for connection. Maybe a nice example to end on is Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who was the psychologist who coined the term flow, has this great example that really stood out to me in his book, where he talks about how a chessboard to someone who doesn't play chess is just a board with carved figurines on it. But if you take the time to actually learn how to play chess, it becomes a portal into flow. And I think there's a lot of examples like that where it might take a little effort to acquire the skills or knowledge you need to engage in something new or an activity, but it's so worth it, because the more knowledge and skills you have, the more portals you'll have into fun. So that, to me at least, has been very inspiring as a reason to try to engage in the world and learn as much as I can.
Amazing. This has been awesome.
Yeah, I'm so grateful. I just feel like you're just such a source of fun and knowledge, and I truly could pick your brain all day. This has just lit me up, and it's truly been the most fun, and I'm so grateful for writing this book. Everyone, please go pick up a copy of The Power of Fun or How to Break Up with Your Phone. We'll link these. We'll also link Fundimension and howtohavefun.com. Is that right? Okay. So stay tuned for stories, and
oh my gosh, thank you both
Thank you
so much for this. And if you ever want to do another live to talk about any of this, I'm totally game. I love talking about it, and it's just wonderful to be connected.
We'd love to.
So
right.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.
You too. Thank you again. Bye.